when I think back to my experience in the K-12 education system, I think it was perhaps grade 9 that we really talked about Sir John A. Um, but after that, I kind of always carried with me that, yeah, without him, I don't think we would necessarily be here, actually, in Canada. And how can I not be grateful for that? Why would I join a mob to cancel him when I don't even know what country I'd be living in if it weren't for him?
Hello, my name is Patrice Dutil. I'm a senior fellow at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute, and I'm today speaking with Lindsay Shepherd, the author of A Day with Sir John A. Macdonald, published by True North Publishing. It's a pleasure to have you, Lindsay. Thank you very much for participating in this conversation.
Yeah, thanks for hosting this.
This is an original book. This is a book for children. It's an illustrated book. There is in Canada a presence for Sir John A. Macdonald in fiction. Sir Richard Romer published a wonderful book called Sir John A. Macdonald's Crusade. This is about 30 years ago. And 20 years ago, Roy McSkimming published Macdonald, a novel. I actually have the copy. And Gordon Henderson and David Bouchard just published just now a novel called Out of the Shadows, Macdonald-Riel and the Complicated Story of a Nation. Again, a fictional account of Sir John A. Macdonald. And then I've got for the teenage crowd, Roderick Ben's The Legend of the Lake of the Mountains, an early adventure of Sir John A. Macdonald. Now, you're adding to this canon of Sir John A. Macdonald in fiction. Tell me about your book. What's A Day in Sir John A. Macdonald's about?
Yeah, so the title, A Day with Sir John A. Essentially, it features two main characters. So there's a young Canadian boy. His name is Emerson. And then there's also Father of Confederation and Canada's first Prime Minister, Sir John A. Macdonald. So those are the two main characters. And the concept is really that Emerson goes on a class field trip to a fictionalized museum called the Museum of Canada's First Prime Minister. And at this museum, he's learning that his peers and the tour guide of this museum, they don't really think highly of Sir John A. Macdonald. And he's kind of wondering why that is, because his grandmother had told him something positive about Sir John A. And so, this book is targeted for age 3 to 7. So then we have that kind of time travel element. And because this book is a blend of fiction and nonfiction. And then he kind of goes back in time, spends a day with Sir John A., and then he reemerges from the experience, understanding that Sir John A. was a man of spirit, vision, a progressive mindset, and he wasn't anything like the negative characterizations that his peers and the tour guide had said.
Now, why does this story sound a little bit familiar? Are you thinking about Bellevue House by any chance?
Well, it's interesting you say that. Yeah, because, okay, so for a while at True North, we had wanted to write a children's book, and we wanted it to have a historical element. We wanted it to be about history for children, but it had never really made much progress. It was something we had just thought about for a long time. And then in May of 2024, so earlier this year, Bellevue House, the National Historic Site, was in the news because it had been closed for a while as Parks Canada was revamping it. And then it opens, and now they've kind of muddled this National Historic Site with, I mean, they've put indigenous elements in every single room of the house. So just to give listeners an image of what that would look like, is you go into what would have been Sir John A. Macdonald's master bedroom. You have the furniture from that time period, and then you also have a flat screen TV with an indigenous elder talking about, I don't know, his teachings on loop. And then also I heard Gregory Piasecki, he's also a historian. He was talking about how you go into what would have been Sir John A's son's bedroom. His son died when he was, that son died when he was 1 year old.
He died in
And
that house. He died in that house.
right, yeah, and it was possibly the crib that he
Yes.
died in that was there. Yeah. And so when you're in that room, you would generally be feeling grief, and you'd be sympathizing and understanding how it feels to have a child die. But on an audio track playing in the room from the speakers is again just some sort of indigenous teaching, it's interrupting your thoughts and your feelings because now you're listening to something completely different. Anyway, so that is all to say that, and in addition, there's trigger warnings all over Bellevue House. The residential school hotline number is posted everywhere. There's all these, reminders about colonialism and how horrible Sir John A. was and how horrible this time period was. That's plastered all over Bellevue House. So I was reading all this and I was like, you know what? Now seems like a good time to write a children's book about Sir John A.
Because certainly the mission of Bellevue House, when it was purchased by the government of Canada in the earlier mid-1960s, early 1960s, even though Macdonald only lived there for a year, and even though there are absolutely no artifacts except for that crib, apparently the crib is the only authentic artifact that actually belonged to Sir John A. There's nothing in that house that is authentic of Sir John A. He was not a rich man at that time. His wife was terribly ill. He lived there for maybe 10 months in the late 1840s. His wife was terribly sick. And but it was still dedicated. I remember seeing it in 1972 or 73. My grade 7 teacher, we were in Ottawa at that time. Our grade 7 teacher arranged a school field trip. And we took the bus down to Kingston, my first time in Kingston, and we visited Bellevue House. And it had quite an impression on me. It left quite an impression on me that, we'd covered Sir John A. Macdonald in grade 7. I mean, again, I only have this is like a long time ago, the vaguest memory of it, but I remember being introduced to Sir John A. Macdonald and the travails of union of the Canada, the Union Province of Canada, the United Province of Canada, and trying to understand the mechanics of the politics of all that. But Bellevue House made it tangible, even though, again, for a 12-year-old, really understanding historical authenticity wasn't really an issue. But it stuck with me. It stuck with me that this was the home of a prime minister who had been prime minister for a long time, who had been the first prime minister of Canada, who was in power for over 20 years, and it seemed to matter. What the government of Canada has done to Bellevue House is basically changed its mandate, and using Sir John A. Macdonald as a pretext has now moved into a discussion of Canada's relationship with its Indigenous peoples. You took exception to all that. The point is, you took exception to all that, and you're trying to appeal to the parents of a younger audience, a much younger audience that will not have encountered Sir John A. Macdonald until they read this book, or until this book is read to them. I think it's a great idea. Again, because there's nothing like this in our country. We don't have a tradition of writing illustrated books on national figures, but I want to come back to that later. But let's talk about you, Lindsay Shepherd. I mean, people will know the name because you burst on the scene in 2017 when you were a graduate student at Macdonald-Laurier University, and you were accused of creating a toxic environment in an undergraduate seminar. You were completely exonerated, and really the whole affair reflected very badly on the faculty at Wilfrid Laurier University. What impact did this event have on you? It must have been very traumatic. What impact did it have on your career?
Well, I think for a while I felt like um, I was going to be unemployable, and this was just anyone in the mainstream was going to look me up and just kind of be scared off. And so I guess for a long time I had a complex about it, and I internally I was proud of what I had done,
As you
like
should,
kind of.
as you should be.
Thank you. Yeah, like kind of taking a whistleblower role.
Yeah.
And at the time, I mean, I was just a grad student. So it's not like I was just in a position where I was like, I have nothing to lose. And so I will expose this. And yeah, there will be consequences for me down the road, but this is worth it. As opposed to people who have kind of cushy jobs with benefits and all that, they're less likely to take a whistleblower role because they have a lot to lose. But at that time, I was just like, if they kick me out, then they'll kick me out and I'll find my way. But yeah, as to what I was saying about just kind of having a complex, I that kind of changed this year because I think the culture is shifting in what I would say my favor. And the things that I was speaking out against.
Now, you wrote a book about it that listeners or viewers should know about. It's called Diversity and Exclusion. What was that book about?
Yeah, so that book is just a complete telling of what happened in 2017 and 2018 at Wilfrid Laurier University. So the whole incident from start to finish. I mean, there's not really a finish because now there's a lawsuit. A lawyer approached me asking to help me pro bono. And so we did discoveries earlier this year. And so that's still kind of ongoing.
7 years later, it's still going.
It is. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I wish you good luck with that. Now, you wrote a book, a serious book of reflection, bearing witness to what I think was a very important event in the intellectual life of our country. And it's a wonderful thing that you took the time to put pen to paper and record this. It's an important book. It will be remembered as an important book. But here you're shifting gears to writing for children. Now, I mean, that must have been quite a leap for you. Or is this something that came to you naturally?
Well, okay. So my children are 5. My son's 5, and then my daughter
Okay.
is almost 3.
Oh, so you've got an audience already.
Right. And frankly, that's all I read these days. I'm only reading children's books. I'm reading a lot of picture books.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
because A Day with Sir John A, my book, it's a storybook, right? It's illustrated. It's fictionalized nonfiction. It's not like it's an encyclopedia for children or something like that. It's meant to be read as a tale.
And there's an adventure in it. There's a built-in adventure.
Right.
Did the kids
Yeah.
like it? You must have road tested it with them.
You know what? Because of all the shipping problems these days, I don't even have any hard copies
Oh,
myself.
no.
Yeah. I'm
No, but as a
still
draft, did you try it out with them as a draft? No?
I showed them pictures,
Okay.
and sometimes they would see it on my screen as I was working on it, and
Yes.
they would come look and be like, "What's that?"
Oh,
And I
good.
would tell them, but I'm still waiting to actually sit down with them and read the whole thing in a hard
Wonderful.
copy.
What was it like? I mean, working with an illustrator, there was no illustrator for diversity and exclusion.
Yeah.
What was that
Okay.
like? I can't imagine. I mean, I've been a reader of cartoons and graphic novels and stuff like that, and I've often thought, what must it be like to work with a cartoonist? When I was the editor of the Literary Review of Canada, I had a wonderful experience working with a cartoonist, but this is different. What was it like? I mean, you got to. I guess you have to sort of parse out what belongs to the visual, what belongs to the verbal or the written? Tell me about it. What was it like?
Yeah, yeah. It does definitely give you an appreciation for children's books because I think a
Yes.
lot of people have the idea, you'll hear everyone say, like, oh, I want to write a children's book one day.
Yeah.
Um, and those who can actually illustrate it themselves, I think definitely have an advantage because they can just do it exactly how they want. I cannot draw, or I'm not artistic in that sense. Um, so we were thinking, can we identify a Canadian illustrator who would
Yes.
be okay being associated with this book? Because a lot of people in the art world
Yes.
probably wouldn't be. And so we could not identify a Canadian illustrator. So we went with someone who lives in Belarus. And so
Really?
she did an amazing job considering she had to recreate, um, you know, partially Canada in the 1880s.
And
And
what's her name? Lindsay, I'm sorry. What's her name?
her name is Tatiana Gubich.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
She needs to
So
be named. Very good.
yes. And so just considering that she's not Canadian, probably didn't know very much about Canada, we're really happy with what
And
she did.
did you have an opportunity to talk to her and say this is what we want, or this is not right, or the colors aren't good,
Oh,
or
oh, definitely. It went on for
yeah?
months. Yeah.
Oh, really? I
Yeah.
mean, it was fun. It was fun.
It's fun. But you sometimes you feel bad because you're like, you have to change this tiny little detail, please. Like it really matters. Um, yeah, but I mean, it's like if I was going to write a story about Belarus in the 1880s, it would be really hard for me. So,
I can
yeah.
imagine. But that collaboration was obviously fruitful.
Yes. And so how it worked was I had the text written out and then I wrote a description of what each page would look like.
Okay.
And then I provided her with reference images. I mean, this takes a long time to do, right? Like
Sure.
just
Oh, I can
reference
imagine.
images to,
Yeah.
what this street would have looked like, what this building would have looked like. This
Yeah.
is what Gothic architecture is.
Yes.
This is what they should be wearing. This is what Sir John A. looked like. This is what his wife looked like.
Yes.
So I just providing all that. Yeah.
Let's talk about Sir John A. Macdonald. What's your reading of Sir John A. Macdonald today? I mean, we're talking in December of 2024. It's been a very rocky period for Sir John A. Macdonald since the release of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in 2015. What's your reading of the state of his reputation at this point?
Yeah. He's very maligned. And the more I did research into him, I thought I'd have to do a lot more defending of him, or I'd have to do a
Mhm.
lot more, even maybe apologizing a little bit. But I ended up not having to because
Yeah.
there's not really a lot to apologize for. Like he has a really good record. And so he's maligned like in such an undeserved way. I think the two things that come to mind for most people are the Chinese head tax,
Yes.
um, and what's the other thing?
Residential
Yeah,
schools.
residential schools.
Yeah.
And so I have been following all these years, his statue being removed, being toppled.
Well,
People
you
think,
live in Victoria. I mean, you were Victoria was the first place where a statue was removed.
yeah, in 2018, I believe.
Yeah.
Yep. So,
So you lived it. I mean, you lived it personally from the beginning of the public erasure of Sir John A. Macdonald. I mean, again, it's worth reminding people that there's a reason why the Macdonald statue was erected in Victoria. It's because he actually represented that riding for a number of years. And this was put up to honor the fact that Canada's first prime minister had actually sought a seat in Victoria. He could have taken any seat, and he chose to represent Victoria, to incarnate the British Columbia presence in his cabinet. How well he did that's another matter, but the gesture was important. The symbolism was magnificent. Um, the this brings, I mean, you again, the originality of your book is that you're seeking to You're inviting parents, guardians to introduce Sir John A. Macdonald to a young audience long before school will do that. Typically across the country, Sir John A. Macdonald is introduced in grade 7, and it will be the only time Sir John A. Macdonald will be discussed in a child's education K to 12. Um, you're the kind of person that breaks for commemoration plaques. You're not a historian, but you really like history. You appreciate Canada's history. What's your sense now of what Canada should be doing? What Canada, the government of Canada, what the provinces should be doing, what local societies should be doing about our heritage? Do you have any thoughts about that? Do you think you have enough in your life? Is there enough heritage in your surrounds? What's your thinking on that?
Well, you're right that I'm the kind of person where if I go to a different city in Canada or if I'm traveling, where I want to go is the National Historic Sites and the old houses and all that. Um, and yeah, they're very important. I'm not. It seems like there's less interpretation going on. Like, for example, people in costume who are offering interactive. I feel like that was used to be more of an occurrence.
It's
Um,
not as prevalent anymore.
right. Yeah. But for example, Mother's Day 2022, I went to Kilby Historic Site, which is near Harrison Hot Springs, in British Columbia. It's a popular tourist place, but this place, Kilby Historic Site, it's a little further away. And there was a special presentation that day for Mother's Day, and it was about fashion and women, and I offered to be the demonstration person on stage. And so I got to put on a real corset from, the 1900s, and I got
Real whalebone?
I think it may have been yeah,
That hurts. That hurts.
it hurt, yeah, but you get used to it.
Yeah, you
And
stop breathing.
and then, a real dress from that era too, so, I mean, stuff like that really sticks with you, and, I just yeah, I love heritage sites. And with your point about the K to 12 system, um, a lot of people have pointed out that in the States, kids really know from a young age who their heroes are, who the founding fathers are, the Mount Rushmore guys. Whereas here, there's just not that tradition. And so, yes, we're introducing Sir John A. as someone important and someone to think about from, yeah, probably before they'll be introduced to him in the school system. When I think back to my experience in the K to 12 education system, I think it was perhaps grade 9 that we really talked about Sir John A. Um, but after that, I kind of always carried with me that, yeah, without him, I don't think we would necessarily be here actually in Canada. And how can I not be grateful for that? Why would I join a mob to cancel him when I don't even know what country I'd be living in if it weren't for him?
Yeah. Well, I think, as you say, I think that your book, the publication of your book, is symptomatic of a return to appreciating Sir John A. Macdonald and his accomplishments, his dogged efforts to unite the country. Not easy, and of course, he had to negotiate with British Columbia to bring in British Columbia at the cost of a railway and a great deal of patience. But you're right. I mean, we are in constant competition with the United States, with American culture. And if we don't do something, I think, about it, we're going to lose our history, or it will be replaced with false history. And that's why it's important, I think, to curate our history, to preserve it, to talk about it, and to talk to our children about it. It's not simply the work of the state, but it's also the work of responsible citizens. Now, I mean, there are countless illustrated books for children on George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and Abraham Lincoln. You're starting something new here. And I hope that you'll turn your mind to doing more. I mean, is this something you or your publisher are thinking about? Are there other historical figures that might be in the in your bag of tricks? Are there other projects in your mind on this kind of model?
I definitely have a preliminary list of
Yes.
other figures that could potentially be written about, but we'll have to see,
Will
how
the
popular
namesake will the namesake of your alma mater, Sir Wilfrid Laurier, be among them?
that one has been brought up. That name, yes.
Yeah. It sure would be. It sure would be. I mean, he's got a great story, a great personal story, overcoming health problems, and of course the whole Quebec context, which is very different from Sir John A. Macdonald, and of course his major accomplishments in 15 years. But yeah, I mean, women, women, we should have women in your list.
There are some women on the list.
Good,
Yep.
good. It's an important task that you've undertaken. Um, where do you think this book is going to go? I mean, you're hoping that libraries will pick it up clearly, that it will be something that parents will want to pick up for the holidays and for after the holidays to introduce their children to Sir John A. Macdonald.
Yes.
Do you have any other hopes? Do you have broader hopes?
I mean, the broader hope would be that it could potentially become a series. But yeah, parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles picking up the book, um, showing it to reading it with the children in their lives. And also, as a parent or as an adult who reads to children, you end up refreshing your memory about a lot of things that you had forgotten. And so that's why I like reading with my kids, is because I'm like, oh, yeah, I did learn about that and I forgot. Or sometimes my son will choose books that I would have never chosen. And then I end up learning a lot about dinosaurs or something like
I
that.
was going to say the dinosaur list is always long, and I guess maybe somebody will say, "Well, Sir John A. Macdonald was a dinosaur; he belongs to the distant past." But your task will be to say, "No, it's actually not that distance. Sir John A. Macdonald is still with us in so many ways." Well, congratulations on that book, Lindsay. I wish you great success, and we'll talk when you have a new series, I hope.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks for being with us. Bye bye.